In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of man can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is Common Sense. Your host, Representative Patricia Morgan, Luis Vargas and Elizabeth Smith with the news, special guest Ray Berberick, brought to you by the Rhode Island Republicans, and now with news from a different perspective.
Hi, I'm Luis Vargas.
And I'm Elizabeth Smith.
And together, we're reporting for Common Sense. This week, we meet with Ray Berberick from the Small Business Association of New England. He tells us about the new initiative to create an Inspector General for Rhode Island. We check in with Jeff Richard, who wants some truth in advertising in our press. And of course, we will have new Are You Kidding Me segments. But first, here's the news for this week.
In the latest news on the pension battle, the Providence Journal has reported that former Supreme Court Justice Frank Williams confirmed a pension settlement deal shortly before Superior Court Judge Sarah Taft Carter convened a court session to hear motions in the trial. The deal will require legislative approval. Details were not immediately released, but the settlement means a possible end to Taft Carter's gag order, which has prevented public officials from talking about the outcome. There was more than a week of voting on the proposed pretrial settlement of the legal war over the more than $4 billion in public employee pension cutbacks.
Just to give you a bit of background on the story, the court's fight, headed for a jury trial on April 20th, centers on Rhode Island's 2011 pension reform law. Faced with potentially crippling increases in state pension costs, state lawmakers raised the retirement age for public employees in the state-run retirement system, reduced guaranteed lifetime pensions while providing employees with new employer-matched 401k-style plans, and suspended the payment of annual cost of living adjustments to retirees. The state's public employees unions sued, alleging the sweeping rewrite of state pension law and earlier pension cuts violated contract protections in the state constitution.
According to the Providence Journal, there are more than 59,000 people affected by the potential settlement, which ultimately would require Rhode Island General Assembly's approval. That includes over 27,000 current pensioners, over 11,000 state employees, over 13,000 teachers, and over 7,000 enrollees in the state-run municipal retirement system, including local police and firefighters. The judge imposed the confidentiality order in mid-March in a failed effort to block public disclosure of the terms of the proposed deal that Governor Raimondo's legal advisor, Mark Dingley, and former Supreme Court Chief Justice Frank Williams, in his role as a special master, were pitching behind closed doors to employee unions and retiree groups. But the critical terms leaked, and they included tweaks in the minimum retirement age, an increase in the defined benefit pensions available to longtime public employees with 20 more years on the job, and the opportunity for more frequent COLAs or for retirees.
And speaking of legal battles, the Providence Journal has reported that former Speaker of the House, Gordon Fox, who was rocked by corruption charges last month, has been disbarred by the state Supreme Court from practicing law in Rhode Island. On top of his freedom and his license to practice law, Gordon Fox also had an honorary degree from Rhode Island College revoked after the state's Council on Post-Secondary Education came during the board's first full board meeting since the former House Speaker pleaded guilty in a corruption probe last month and voted unanimously to revoke his honorary doctoral degree.
Speaking of agencies, the Providence Journal has reported that the state has sought a contractor to review the possibility of merging transportation agencies in the Ocean State. On March 25th, the new Raimondo administration quietly opened bids for a contract to provide transportation management and review services. Among the stated goals of this investigation, to take a step-back look at the effectiveness of having multiple state agencies operate different pieces of Rhode Island's transportation network, from the ports and airports to RIPTA bus routes and road builders. The Department of Transportation has acknowledged that there are two bidders for the contract, but the agency has been unwilling, so far, to identify them, despite a state law requiring the disclosure. Rhode Island Transportation includes RIDOT, which is responsible for the design, construction, maintenance, and construction of 1,102 miles of state roads and highways, 772 bridges, and 777 traffic signals. The ports are overseen by Commerce Rhode Island, the airports by the Rhode Island Airport Corporation, and the state's public transportation network by RIPTA, and the state's bridge tolling system by the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority. The goal of this investigation is to determine the operational challenges and corresponding improvement opportunities for Rhode Island's transportation agencies, and provide recommendations. The bid documents state. The winning bidder will be required to conduct a management evaluation and review to assess general effectiveness and performance relative to industry standards and best practices as compared to similar agencies in the United States.
As we talk about budgets, Governor Gina Raimondo is starting to back off of at least one of the things she proposed in her budget for 2015. The Providence Journal has reported that Governor Gina Raimondo on Tuesday dropped plans to merge 4 offices that represent Rhode Island's most vulnerable citizens into one division of advocacy, after several of the state's leading advocates said the plan would undermine their work. The measure, included in the governor's budget, was scheduled for a hearing before the Senate Finance Committee last Tuesday. The plan was projected to save over $50,000 in fiscal 2016, but by merging the 4 offices into one division of advocacy within the State Executive Office of Health and Human Services. The decision followed objections by the state's mental health advocate and the state's child advocate, among others, who said it would pose a conflict of interest for their departments by placing them within the same agency that they may have to litigate against one another on behalf of their clients. The 16-member board of directors of the nonprofit Mental Health Association of Rhode Island also voted March 18th in strong opposition to the plan. Susan Jacobson, the association's executive director, said, "After further discussion of this proposal with the respective advocates and hearing their concerns, the governor has decided not to move forward with this article," the state's budget officer Thomas Mullaney wrote in a memo Tuesday to the chair of the House and Senate Finance Committees. He went on further to say that although providing more administrative support to these independent agencies will still be pursued, the establishment of a new division of advocacy is not deemed necessary. This isn't the only time she has had to back off of one of her proposals, however. Governor Gina Raimondo is also no longer asking the state to post legal notices and advertisements online instead of in newspapers. The Providence Journal reported that the proposal was in the budget that Gina Raimondo submitted to the General Assembly on March 12th, but she has since asked to remove it. House fiscal staff said the measure would have saved $100,000, and foregoing the savings doesn't put the budget out of balance. Newspapers have opposed changing to legal notice requirements, worrying about the loss of revenue. Part of Raimondo's staff said that she changed her position in light of both feedback from newspapers and the relatively small savings that would have been generated. Now, let's make our way to the State House as we meet with House Minority Leader Brian Newberry and Representative Anthony Giarusso to see what they're working on. Representative Giarusso, we've heard a lot about a Taylor Swift tax. Can you tell me exactly what that's about?
It sounds like a pretty cool name, but the fact that it ends in the word tax is a little troubling. Now, I don't know why they always want to slay the goose that lays the golden eggs, but it's another attack on people that have stuff. But my biggest problem is not so much that you're taxing the extremely wealthy that have $1 million plus second home. It's that you're opening up the pipeline. You're setting up the infrastructure for the state to collect property tax. So in my opinion, I don't care if it was 1 peso on $1 billion, it doesn't matter. It's not what they're gonna collect today, it's what they're setting up to collect for tomorrow.
Leader Newberry, we've heard a bit about bills that are being worked on here at the State House, but can you walk us through what it's like to be a state representative? What's it like in the day of a state representative here at the State House?
Well, there really isn't a typical day. It's a year-round job, but it's not necessarily a lot of work all the time. It's moments of intense work and time commitment followed by days or weeks of inactivity, depending on what time of year. For example, we get very busy here in June. I'm a partner in a law firm in Boston. I have a very busy legal practice, but I always keep June basically free because I know at any time in June I may have to come in here and be here till 2 o'clock in the morning. On the other hand, this time of year, we're here in the beginning of April. There's things going on, there's committee hearings, but I arrived today around 3:30, and I'll be leaving probably by about 5:30, and I'll be going home. I got other things to do tonight. If I had something to stay for, I'd stay. So it very much varies.
According to the Providence Journal, a bill that would ban pharmacies statewide from selling tobacco products drew strong opposition Tuesday from independent pharmacies, some which fear they wouldn't be able to survive without the sales. Meanwhile, health advocates at the hearing before the House Corporations Committee praised the effort, arguing that selling cigarettes and other tobacco products in the same place where prescriptions are sold sends a mixed message about health. The bill, sponsored by Representative Catherine Kazarian of East Providence, follows the decision by Woonsocket-based CVS Health to stop selling tobacco products at its stores nationwide last year. She says, keeping in mind the institution of a pharmacy and what it stands for, and tobacco and the harmful effects we know it causes, I just don't believe that both of those products should be in the same place.
Nicholas Shanos, who owns Suburban Pharmacy in Warwick, said he thought CVS's decision fueled the proposal. Shanos and other local pharmacy owners stressed that their business models are different than those of large companies such as CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid. There are fewer than 20 independent pharmacies remaining in the state, Shanos said. At what point do you say candy is detrimental to people? Shanos went on to say, arguing that the bill infringes on the rights of businesses to select which products they sell.
Next, we will join Representative Pat Morgan as she meets with Ray Berberick, from the Small Business Association of New England. But first, we hear from Louis on the proposed new SNAP card regulations.
Are you kidding me? Is the Senate really proposing to restrict SNAP card usage at the same time that it directs the State Department of Human Services to take over all investigations of inappropriate use of SNAP funds? Senate Bill 312, sponsored by Walaska, Cody, Raptakis, Falag, and Lombardo, is trying to do just that. For the first time, SNAP recipients will be prohibited from using their food stamp cards for alcohol, tobacco, or lottery tickets. Now, how many of those recipients do you think will actually get that memo? So A, abuses of SNAP in Rhode Island can be expected to skyrocket, and this at the same time the Department of Human Services is required by the bill to take over all investigative activity surrounding the program. Today, all is done by the feds. Senate 312 says nothing about increasing the Department of Human Services' capacity to actually perform this investigative work. That would cost money that we don't have. Good job, senators. Now, emergency assistance should not be used for booze, butts, or bingo, of course. But the way this bill is written, we are about to witness the latest installment of the Keystone Cops, Rhode Island style. Are you kidding me?
Hello, welcome to Common Sense. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life.
Join us this week and every week where we discuss the issues of the day with the people who know the details behind them. Policy experts, business leaders, town councilors, and state legislators. We catch you up on the news from a different perspective. We check in with Jeff Richard and hear what he's thinking about. And where we always are willing to ask, are you kidding me? So join us each week at Verizon Channel 34 or Cox 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 10 a.m. Be sure to like us on Facebook at Common Sense and follow us at Twitter at Common Sense RI. Brought to you by the Rhode Island Republican Party.
Hi, I'm Representative Patricia Morgan. Welcome to Common Sense. This is a program that tries to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. And today as our guest, we have Ray Berberick, who is the founder and CEO of Small Business Solutions. And the reason that I invited him to come and talk with you today is that he came to us today to offer testimony in the House Finance Committee on the Inspector General. This was a bill that was sponsored by our own Representative Daniel Riley and is supported by all the members of the Republican caucus. The Inspector General would be a brand new position in our state government. It would be independent, meaning that it would not be subject to the ability of either the governor or the speaker or the Senate president to stop them. And the Inspector General would be allowed to go out and look at any part of government, state, local, to find areas of waste, fraud, abuse, ways to make our government more efficient, more accountable, and to find savings. Because one thing we know in Rhode Island, we're paying a lot of taxes. And I know it's my goal, it's the goal of every Republican up there, to make sure that the taxes, the money that you give to state government and local government is used wisely, and that we squeeze every bit of value out of every penny that we can. And the Inspector General is one of the ways to do that. I can tell you from the testimony that it was supported by everybody who came to testify. I don't think one person came and said anything against it. Operation Clean Government has been supporting it for a number of years. And hopefully with your help and Mr. Berberick's help, we can actually get this done, because it would be a very good thing for Rhode Island. So, Ray, welcome.
Thank you.
First, before we get into the topic too much more, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Well, with respect to the Inspector General business, I was on active duty for 21 years in the Army, and for 3 years of that, I was the Inspector General for Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And in order to become Inspector General, you have to go to the Army IG school. And in fact, that school trains several Inspector Generals to go out even into the levels of the federal government and the other IGs throughout the military. So it's the one central IG school. And in the middle of IG school, as we were learning the concepts, the tools, and what the IG can do, my first thought was, everybody needs to know about this, not just the folks in the units back home, but corporate America could benefit from the policies, nonprofits, government, municipal governments, the system of the Inspector General, the way that they follow the root cause problem solving model and adherence to standards. They're the standard bearer, and they are not politically pressured by anybody or any influence whatsoever. They deliver objective recommendations on how to solve a problem.
So there are real tools and strategies that you learned in the Army.
Yes.
And did you do it in the Army for a number of years then?
3 years.
Okay. Do you like it?
Yes, it was. In fact, it led me to be helpful in a lot of other volunteer organizations that I've been involved with. That when contentious issues would come up, it was the training and the skill sets that I had developed as an Inspector General that kept the group focused to find the right solution to the problem.
Okay, so you are now out of the Army.
Yes.
And you have a small business solutions company. And you do kind of the same thing there. Do you want to explain how the IG works with small business?
Thank you. It's very simple. If there's a small business owner that has a problem and it's not appropriate for an attorney or an accountant or the police, they have a morale problem. They have a absentee problem or folks showing up to work, or the business owner typically does not have a lot of time to go into this in depth, and all of their employees may not be as candid, and they won't, it's not a case of lying, but they can't get to the core truth. So what I offer is a service that I come in, the business owner says, here's the problem, tells all the employees, talk with Ray. A lot of the information is confidential. Hopefully I can get to the core of the problem in a very short period of time, and then leave a series of recommendations for the business owner to consider implementing after I'm gone.
Okay, and so that sounds to me like this is not about getting rid of employees. It's about fixing problems.
Yes.
In things that are stopping a company or a government department or a program from becoming the best, more efficient, more effective.
Correct.
Right. So it's not just about, you go in and you try to get rid of people. You try to fix the problems that keep them from being effective.
Absolutely. It's like if you have a person who is redirecting funds illegally, and then once that investigation,
that would be about getting rid of somebody.
Right. but as soon as the IG has and that group, that office, all of the folks that work there, they're well trained, they're smart people. Once they get a whiff that there's criminality involved, they immediately stop and then hand everything at that point into the investigation off to the Attorney General. So the IG does not do criminal investigation. But say, for example...
However, if you saw that there was a system that allowed... In other words, if you have a good system, people can't take money because the system accounts for all the money going through, right? So
Exactly.
you would correct the system so that there isn't that vulnerability?
To the best of our ability. Humans are humans, and human nature, there are folks out there who are going to take advantage of the system. There are a lot of clever folks that can hide things well within the system, as we're seeing with all of the cyber online internet issues and identity theft. I mean, it's pervasive nowadays. But even still, bank robbers, you rob a bank, you're only going to walk away with $1,000 or $2,000 at most, as opposed to the old days with $50,000. Then it was worth it. But there's still folks that attempt to rob banks nowadays.
Yes.
So you're just not going to fundamentally erase the core problem, but you can go a long way to solving it.
And instead of them getting 50, they're getting 1 or 2 now.
Right.
Yes.
And then there's insurance to cover all that, and so on and so forth. But you're better servicing the system and the taxpayers in the long run.
Okay, all right. But in a government system, you would look at the systems and find out where the vulnerabilities are as well, and just kind of
yes, and actually
chase it down. You know that.
Once the IG
as
office,
far as fraud or abuse.
Once an IG office is set up, anybody can contact them. There's typically an 800 number and an email, certainly, or even a website with a contact us. All of the information that comes into the IG office is privileged. It's protected information, confidential, and then there's a screening of the allegations. So it's somewhat of a whistleblower program, and then the whistleblower protections come in as well. But a taxpayer or a state employee could call up and go, hey, here's the situation. Everybody in our office comes in at 9, takes a 2-hour lunch and leaves at 2:30. And, stuff's not getting done.
That's wasteful. Sure.
And, so what mechanism is out there to fix that?
And so, just something like that, you just look at the system and then you make recommendations, not to get rid of the people, but to make them actually
Absolutely
work while they're on the clock.
Let's say there's a function at the state level where an employee must action an application, and we find out that they're doing 20 a week. And then the IG has the ability to do homework and go out to other states and say, every other state's doing 40 a week. I mean, it's a contrived example, but without going into details,
sure.
that's one of the things they could do. As I mentioned in testimony on Tuesday night up at the Finance Committee, there's pretty good evidence out there that LED lighting can save money. And so what if the state decided to go to all LED lighting throughout all state buildings? Well, wait a minute, before you pull the trigger, shouldn't someone look into that to see how much it's
Really
going to cost
crunch the
and
numbers.
how much it's going to save?
Sure.
Who's going to do that right now? DEM, the auditor? IG's perfect for that.
Okay, great. All right. Well, listen, we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the things that an inspector general could do for the people of Rhode Island.
Are you kidding me? I know what. Let's force yet another increase in health insurance premiums for more than half of Rhode Islanders, and it's an unnecessary one at that. It's true. Senate Bill 318 requires insurance companies to charge exactly the same premiums for their products, no matter their customer's gender. It comes courtesy of Senators Sosnowski, Miller, Nesselbush, Crowley, and Golden, 4 of which of them are women. What it means is now that women will get to pay the same higher premiums that men have been enjoying for years. Newsflash, ladies, according to the Federal Centers for Disease Control, men are more likely to be overweight than women. Men are likely to be smokers than women. Men are 7 times more likely to be chronic drinkers. Men are less likely to wear seatbelts and are much more likely to engage in high-risk physical activities. Where do these senators think these insurance premiums come from? The answer is actuarial experience with the insured. It's more expensive to insure men. Insurance is a numbers game, and numbers don't lie. It appears that our state senate wants to ensure that it's a politically correct numbers game as well. So enjoy the more lofty premium, ladies. You don't need that extra money in your pocketbooks, did you? Are you kidding me?
Hi, I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we're back talking with Mr. Berberick, Ray Berberick of Portsmouth. He has been an Inspector General in the Army, and he would like to see Rhode Island state government do that as well, because there are incredible savings that taxpayers can get, that the state can get, by using an Inspector General. They are independent, and they can do just about any kind of investigating that they want to find waste, fraud, and abuse in our system. Ray, we were talking a little bit earlier about Massachusetts has an Inspector General, but how many states have it?
There's a website called the Association of Inspectors General that has a member list, and 26 states actually use offices of Inspectors General at various levels. And about 16 actually have a state level Inspector General.
Okay, all right, but half of the states use the Inspector General's office in some way. Some of them state level, other of them more local, or just within departments or divisions, or...
Actually, there's one very interesting case, the state of Florida. There's no state Inspector General, but they have 26 offices for each state agency. Every state agency in Florida has its own Inspector General. In fact, the Palm Beach School Department is so large, they have their own Inspector General.
Okay, and this is the person then that gives oversight to all of their spending, all of their processes, employees, purchasing, buildings, anything.
They can. The implication there is they aren't proactive in watching everything all of the time. Unfortunately, they tend to be more reactive. But as an administrator is looking over a budget and a number doesn't seem right, he calls the IG and says, come in here, I need you to look into this in depth. Then the IG goes out and starts their investigation, and it's comprehensive and exhaustive. Then the IG comes back and goes, boss, here's what I found, here's my recommendations. And then the IG goes off to the next issue.
Okay, but the Inspector General, as that we're proposing, would be independent, so he wouldn't have to get the sign-off of the chief administrator.
Absolutely.
He hopefully would work well with that person, but
Absolutely.
But could be independent.
I mean, if I were able to influence the process and how it was established in Rhode Island, first of all, I would find an old Army general who used to be an Inspector General himself or herself, and they can't come from Rhode Island, they can't know a soul here, but bring in that retired Army 1, 2, or 3 star, and they are the IG. And then I would go to Massachusetts and then look for the number 3, 4, 5, or 6 person who has been in the system a while, give them a very attractive offer to come down and be the number 2 down here.
All right.
Then you can hire a bunch of investigators to flesh out the office to do the actual work. But that number 1, 2 combination will ensure that the IG remains impartial and objective and can't be influenced by any person or party or entity.
Okay, and I know the legislation that's there now has that person being appointed by the governor, I believe.
Well, and that can be established anyway. I mean, just because it's in that bill doesn't mean it can't be changed. Whatever way all stakeholders agree that is the most objective way to find the most objective person is the right way.
All right.
So whether it's appointed individually by the governor or actually perhaps by the governor, the Senate president, and the speaker, the 3 of them jointly decide who the IG is.
I know
going to
some
be.
states have them actually elected by the people.
It's one way to do it too. I personally.
You don't want to run for
no.
political office. All right,
no.
I see. Yeah.
No, I don't think that gets,
So you
by
think
its nature,
appointing-
that's almost contradictory.
Okay, all right. So when you look down at all of these states that have, and you have a list here
Right.
of states that already have Inspector General. You have Louisiana, New York, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Massachusetts, Ohio, Utah, South Carolina, Indiana, Georgia, Illinois, Florida. There's a bunch of them, big states. What kinds of results have the inspectors general been able to give to the folks in those states?
A couple of years ago, well, if you go to any of the state IG websites, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Ohio come to mind because their reports are easy to read.
Okay.
And the way that they organize the data on the website, but they're all fundamentally the same. And it's guided by, again, the National Association of Inspectors General, it's the Association of Inspectors General. So I'm sure that there's a lot of cross-informational sharing and whatnot. But anyway, a couple of years ago, the state of Pennsylvania in 2013 took action and made recommendations that caused the return of $130 million to the state of Pennsylvania. Last year in 2014, the Pennsylvania IG returned $90 million simply in welfare fraud back to the state of Pennsylvania.
In welfare fraud?
Yes.
Okay. In 90 million?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big number.
It is.
That's a very big number. What other things have they looked at?
The various states, the state of Ohio,
Okay.
they looked at the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. They found out that employees at the state medical facility were using the facilities there for private health care. And
So they were coming in with their children?
Yes. There was Division of Natural Resources and Engineering. There was fraud going on where people were using material from a construction project to go and take care of their own personal properties at home, like repaving their driveway.
Oh, so just redirecting the asphalt layer
Exactly.
to their driveway. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was, it can be as simple as there was a dental board. There was people who were improperly filling out their time cards, so they were getting paid 40 hours a week to do nothing.
Okay.
And the list goes on. It's really sad. Again, any person can go to any state IG website, look at the annual reports. You don't have to read everything, but just the headlines and the topics and the bottom line, and it's fairly convincing. Again, go back to that human nature being what it is. And even today, there's ridiculous amounts of fraud, waste, and abuse costing tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars.
All right. So do you think most of these came from, you had said that the Inspector General would set up a hotline or a call in and give us your tips, a tip line.
Sure.
That is kind of employee driven, maybe people who just see that somebody's might be doing something wrong and wants it to stop. And I think there are a lot of good people in government who just get frustrated when they see waste and fraud going on.
Well, I'm sure your viewers have seen the news over the last several years, and the news stations have their investigative reporters, and there's been video of a number of municipal and or state level employees who've been followed home during alleged working hours, and it goes from there. So who's doing the investigation now? The news stations?
The news stations.
Independent agencies that have to go to the press? Wouldn't it be great if there was an in-house government facility that could take care of this without all of the bad press, shall we say?
Well, and an inside person would actually probably be able to get something done besides just raise it as an issue. They could get it fixed.
Well, again, depending on how the Inspector General office is set up, it works easier in a military platform because of the authoritarian environment. But when the IG shows up, you must comply with their requests. So they are able to get that information. They would have essentially subpoena level power.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to take a break right now and come right back.
Are you kidding me? If competitive bidding is a best practice in purchasing, why is our Senate trying to cut way back on its use? Could it be to spend more of your money with less of your oversight? Senate Bill 316 proposes to redefine small purchases made by state government. Those are the ones which are exempt from the requirement that competitive bids be received. For construction, the definition of a small purchase will go from $10,000 to $50,000. For everything else, the meaning of the word small jumps from $5,000 to $20,000. Now, how many no-bid $19,000 purchase orders does it take to add up to real money? Especially when they can all go to the same vendor, based only on the signature of a bureaucrat. Sure, it's harder and more time-consuming to use the bidding process. Why am I suspicious that that's exactly why Senators Lombardi, Archambault, DePalma, Ciccone, and Walaska want to get around the practice? Gentlemen, competitive bidding also safeguards the interests of the citizens that elected you. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and today we have Ray Berberick talking to us about the Inspector General's office and about some of the things that Inspector Generals can do to make our tax dollars be used more wisely, more effectively, to stop waste, fraud that's in our state government. And we were talking about the fact that 26 other states at this point have Inspectors General. And we are really trying very hard now to get it in Rhode Island, because I think you folks out there know as much as all of us that there are some real problems in Rhode Island government. We see it every day on Channel 10 or Channel 12, Channel 6. They're always coming up with these investigative reports that are demonstrating that money is being wasted, that there's fraudulent activity going on with our tax dollars. And the Inspector General is one of those offices that can help us. You can't ever stop it. As Ray has said, there's a thing called human nature. But you can really put a damper on it, and you can make people more accountable for the dollars that they're taking. We had talked about Pennsylvania and the huge amount of money that they have been saving. $130 million 2 years ago, $90 million last year, just in welfare fraud last year, $90 million. You had picked out some stuff from Massachusetts. Massachusetts actually has an Inspector General.
Some of the 2014 reports, and again, any person can go to the Mass IG website, look under publications, and then the reports link. But even the top report, Verizon New England agrees to pay over $1.3 million to settle allegations of state contract overbilling.
All right, so this was Verizon billing state offices or
In
state government
Massachusetts.
for telephone service or something.
Right.
And they made it too generous for themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's one, the Mass Department of Transportation fleet vehicles. In order to save some money, the fleet was supposed to turn in 107 vehicles, and they only turned in 6 in order to qualify for additional funding from the federal government.
I don't understand that. They had 107 vehicles and they were supposed to turn
Right.
those in, but they only turned in 6 of them?
Yes, and it
And
had
so
to
the
do
other
with...
101 disappeared?
No, they were supposed to, the funds were designated for vehicle emissions reduction. And the state was required to turn in 107 vehicles, but they only turned in 6.
Oh, okay. All right. So do you have a dollar amount of what they've saved in Massachusetts, or is it by...
It was 223 million 2 years ago.
223 million. You know, here in Rhode Island, we're looking at huge deficits. It's like $1 billion over the next 3 years. So if we could save at least a fraction of that, obviously those states are all bigger than us, but if we could save money, it makes our challenge as taxpayers a lot less, right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw in this last budget that there were a lot of other fees and taxes introduced again to taxpayers. You know, they just keep nibbling at us until there's just not much more that we can give, especially in this stagnant economy. So if we could squeeze out that waste, find the people who are fraudulently billing us or using facilities that they shouldn't be using, they're not going to be looking for more taxes and more fees to hide in the budget to get us.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, why do you think tell me first, we have an auditor general, which is employed by the House. This office is a part of the General Assembly. And they actually go through all of the books, correct? All
Yes.
of the books, the accounting of every agency, every department in government. How is the Inspector General different from the Auditor General?
It would take a little bit too much time to explain in great detail. I will make a shot at it. But simply for those that are interested, go to Mass or Pennsylvania, Ohio, or any one of the state IG offices' websites. Look at their annual reports. You don't have to read every word of every report, but scan it to get a feel. And then go to the State Auditor General, the Office of the Auditor General, and then they have on their website a list of reports that they've been doing over the years. And again, open those, read them, scan them, but you get a feel for the subtle difference between the mandate of the twos. The auditor will look at the state pension or the state assets, or they will look at the internal control programs. They will look at the lottery. So if the lottery says we brought in $100 and we awarded 50 in prizes and 30 for labor and whatever other. So the auditor says, all right, 100 came in, 100 went out, 100 is accounted for. That's what the auditor does.
Okay.
The auditor doesn't
He just
necessarily
follows the
launch automatically into, hey, of your 100 out, there's 50 expenses and you're inefficient with those.
Okay.
What's the probable cost? I mean, he is an auditor. But if you make the auditor the subpoena power investigation level, IG like, they are 3 or 4 layers of bureaucracy down and can be influenced. That's why the Inspector General ought to be separate, ought to be independent. In a wire and block diagram, it would be literally off the office of the governor.
Okay.
I mean, you got to put it somewhere. But it really is independent. And
Okay, so let me just see if I understand this. The Auditor General, he's not independent because he works for the Speaker or the Senate President. He works for the General Assembly.
Yes.
So he's not necessarily
Or
independent.
the executive branch.
Even though he follows the money, he just makes certain that if you say you got 100, he wants to know where the 100 went.
Right.
Right. But he doesn't then look at it and say, well, geez, that's an awful lot of money for overhead. Or that's a lot of money that you spent for buying asphalt or cement. He just says, okay, you got 100 in, this is how you spent it, it's accounted for.
Right.
But he's not looking at whether it was used wisely or if the dollars have been deployed in the most effective way.
I would say that's the case until I have a chance to actually talk to him.
Okay, all right. And then the biggest difference is, I think, that the Auditor General does not have subpoena power.
Right.
So even if he sees something that for him is a red flag, because he's looking at the books, he might see something as a red flag, but because he doesn't have investigative powers, he doesn't have subpoena power, all he can do is say, this seems to be an issue, a problem that I think should be looked into, but he doesn't look into it. Is that?
That's entirely possible. That until I have a chance to spend some time in the Auditor General's office, I can't really tell you exactly what goes on. But
that would be the indifference for Inspector General. He actually does have the power and could go if he saw a red flag.
Oh, absolutely. And conceivably, if the state sets up an office, then it probably wouldn't take but a couple of weeks for the caseload to fill up. And a good Inspector General will go in and talk to the governor. And in fact, I would insist upon it that the IG sit down with the governor, the Senate President, and the Speaker and say, here's 30 cases that all have merit, but here's 3 or 4 that we believe will have the greatest return on investment. So you can't tell me what the outcomes are, but we can jointly agree on what my caseload's going to look like for the better of all in the state.
Okay, that's a good thing for the better of all people in the state. And we're going to take a little break right now and come right back.
Are you kidding me? Automatic raises to the minimum wage? Senate Bill 272, sponsored by Senators Raptakis, McCaffrey, Ciccone, Lombardi, and Archibald, is continuing with the theme of our senators driving up business costs, with the inevitable result of driving down business activity. We come to Senate Bill 272. This legislation is a real twofer. It reaffirms the hard dollar increase in our minimum wage through this year and indexes that number to the Consumer Price Index going forward. Now here's the deal. Raising the minimum wage is politically difficult because economists and business owners alike recognize that it is a forced increase in overhead expense that is not compensated by any increases in productivity. So those constituencies yell whenever it happens. On the other hand, politicians love to toss a bone to the voters so they can take the heat, ignoring the resulting decrease in jobs. It gives them a chance to tout what they've been trying to move forward towards, a living wage. Problem is, no one can live on minimum wage, and it was never intended to be a career salary. They've now indexed the minimum wage so it will go up on its own, without the messy need to constantly reintroduce contentious legislation. Now, raising the minimum wage raises prices, which raises the Consumer Price Index, which raises the minimum wage, which raises the Consumer Price Index, and around it goes. Problem solved for the politicians, problem made worse for you and me. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and I'm sitting here with Ray Berberick, who has been an Inspector General in the Army, and sitting next to him for a while, I know that if he came into my office, I would start being sweating a little bit. But he has actually been an expert. He has gone to school and he has done the work of an Inspector General, and he knows the things that Rhode Island could benefit from if we had one. Obviously, there are 26 other states who have Inspectors General, and just from some of the statistics you give me, they're saving hundreds of millions of dollars for their taxpayers, for their government, making it more efficient, squeezing out that waste and fraud. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that, people are aware of from the Channel 10s and the Channel 12s, from the news media. They all have those tip lines, and people call in and say, you ought to check this out. One of the things there is people get angry, and they say they want something done, but they're just they're a news organization. They're not an Inspectors General. They don't have subpoena power. They don't have the ability to change any of the systems that caused this thing to happen in the first place. And that's what an Inspector General does, correct?
Yes.
right?
Yes, the way the system works is that the IG sitting there, a person calls in, the 1-800-IG, said, I think that there's fraud going on in Department X. And the conversation
Give some
ensues. It
indication.
can be anonymous. They hang up the phone. The person who took the message takes it to the IG. The IG grabs one of his investigators and said, let's go find out if these allegations are credible. They go out, come back, and then they said, yes, boss, I've got bad news. Unfortunately, it's more credible than you think. Okay, let's put the team together. Now go down and look at what's going on. The team goes down, does the investigation, and then they come back with findings and then a series of very specific recommendations. The IG, they do all of the quality control, make sure everything's to standard, and then the IG walks into the governor and says, here's what we've been working on. Here are 10 recommendations on where this department should implement, and they will save X or Y or Z dollars, as the case may be. The governor very simply takes this and says to the Director of Health and Human Services, I want you to implement these 10 recommendations immediately, and if you can't do it, I will find somebody who will.
Okay.
So it's the governor's authority that makes the implementation.
Right.
And it's state spending that we're looking at. And if I was in the General Assembly, I'd say, my goodness, if we could find $100 million, your biggest problem would be how to spend that newfound $100 million.
Or give it back to the taxpayers.
Or give it back to the taxpayers. Actually reduce the sales tax.
So that would be when there's just wasteful processes, things that are allowing money to be frittered away, maybe. But what about when you find criminal activity?
Well,
what does the
again,
IG do then?
The Army system, and I'm reasonably comfortable with all the other systems, as soon as there's a discussion, the IG is always on the phone with the Attorney General, almost daily. When I was in the Army, I was talking with the JAG about every case all the time, because there's a fine legal line in a lot of the work that needs to be done. And at any point, the Attorney General can go, hey, IG, that's really starting to look pretty nasty. Give it to me.
Okay.
So
right.
and in fact, I would imagine some of the state IGs have their own internal legal counsel that's looking at that.
Okay.
That's certainly an option too.
All right. I mean, in the last few years, I know that Ken Block did that data mining study of spending in the Health and Human Services area, and at least, I mean, it was hidden from public eye. We weren't allowed to see it, and yet we know that there were a lot of instances that he found of fraud with food stamps, EBT cards, where I know he indicated that you could see that EBT cards were being used at a place like BJ's, where one card after another was being run through. Clearly an indication that whoever was running them through, 20 cards run right after the other, probably wasn't the owner of that EBT card.
Right.
And yet we never heard about any prosecutions or any changes that happened in those systems based upon that data mining. I know a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a person who was convicted in federal court for stealing $600,000 from the food stamp program. And I think last year that I saw that there were 10 others of much smaller amounts that went through the state courts. But I don't have a sense of confidence that the system has been changed to stop that kind of fraud.
And that's where the Inspector General can come in, because they have published reports. All of their reports and investigations, for the most part, they have roll-ups in the annual reports, but the actual reports are there. So anybody in state government can go and look at it. And then the IG actually has a part of their system where there is follow-up. 6 to 12 months after the fact, they'll go back and look to see.
So he makes the recommendations, or she makes the recommendations, and then they follow up to make sure that they have been put in place. Because I don't really know that any changes have been made. But clearly the Inspector General then can then just keep running this down until the changes are made to tighten up the system. Because people don't mind giving their money to folks who are down on their luck, right? We want everybody to be taken care of. We want that safety net to be there, but we don't want it stolen from. We don't want fraudulent use of those
That's
benefits.
a good point that needs to be underscored. The IG would not go and cut benefits. In fact, benefits could potentially increase if we cut out the fraud,
Programs
waste,
would
and
be
abuse.
stronger, sure.
Because you might have 3 people doing the work of one to pay the people who really need welfare.
Right. Who need the benefits.
And
exactly.
that's part of the beauty of the system.
So you could look at processes. What about contracts? I noticed there was one there where Verizon overbilled. How do you go about looking at that kind of a... Do you compare with other like contracts and...
There's the IG, the team would be talking with other inspectors general. Again, there's the Association of Inspector General at the national level where information can be exchanged. So the IG can say that for any number of full-time equivalents in state government, here is a reasonable amount to spend on telecommunications, information technology, and it doesn't take very much to do a comparison contrast. If the numbers are like 3, 4, and 5 between 3 different states where it's a close shot group, okay, there's probably not a reason to launch a major investigation. But if Massachusetts is spending, say, $5 per state employee on telecommunications and we're spending 20,
there's a big difference.
then maybe something needs to be looked at.
All right. We're going to have to wrap up here pretty soon. What is your guess on what this office would cost the taxpayers of Rhode Island to establish?
The state of Massachusetts in their annual report a few years ago said their operating budget was about $2 million. So
And we're smaller.
So I would say we could probably do this for somewhere right around $1 million. Depends, and it can be set up anyway.
And it clearly sounds to me like it would pay for itself and something that we really need to get done in Rhode Island.
Conceivably and arguably 100 times or more.
100 times savings. So thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate the information you've given us. And I hope the people will get behind this initiative and try to make it happen in Rhode Island. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
You bet.
Hello. Welcome to Common Sense. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life.
Join us this week and every week where we discuss the issues of the day with the people who know the details behind them. Policy experts, business leaders, town councilors, and state legislators. We catch you up on the news from a different perspective. We check in with Jeff Richard and hear what he's thinking about. And where we always are willing to ask, are you kidding me? So join us each week at Verizon Channel 34 or Cox 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 10 a.m. Be sure to like us on Facebook at Common Sense and follow us at Twitter at Common Sense RI. Brought to you by the Rhode Island Republican Party.
I would love to be a member of big media. I would sign up to be the person who writes the headlines. You know, the large print that gets our attention. The headlines have got to get to the readers who actually have a newspaper in hand, into the story, digging for the dirt. Recently, the Newport Daily News put this on the front page. In Pell Visit, Raimondo unveils school initiative. That would be the Pell Elementary School in Newport. And the initiative is simply a few lines in the budget the governor submitted. Now over at the Projo, the headline staff wrote, Raimondo urges aid for school construction. So at this point, we know that the last school to go up with state money was the Pell, lovely school, and we know that the governor wants $90 million in the new budget to build more schools. As quoted, we have a responsibility to provide warm, safe schools for our children. Well, I guess I can certainly agree with that. So, what is this really all about? It is about getting union workers back to work with taxpayer dollars. It is about creating more bureaucracy. It is about the gamesmanship Rhode Island politicians play with us to show we don't have a clue about what they are really doing. Well, if I were crafting the headlines, you would have read the following. Governor wants to create another agency with your tax dollars. It shall be called the School Building Authority. How about this headline? Governor placates unhappy unions by proposing state prevailing wage jobs building schools. You remember those workers who have been at home collecting unemployment because private industry doesn't want to build anything in Rhode Island. Another headline might be, Governor proposes a budget that nobody in the legislature believes has a chance of passage. Why do we spend the time to create budgets that get chopped to shreds by the General Assembly? We pay serious money to lots of state employees who sit at desktop computers and fiddle with numbers that go into the budget. The General Assembly has the obligation, no obligation, to pay attention to. Remember now, it's the Speaker of the House who runs the state. He calls down to the chair of the House Finance Committee and he says, here's what I want you to do. And it is done. The governor can veto the entire budget and look like a dunce or just let it ride. Remember, no line item veto. No threat that the favorite expenditure of the Speaker might get run over. All these people are in the same political party they're called Democrats. And who are the Democrats beholding to for re-election funding? That would be your favorite unions. Oh well, there's always another election a couple of years from now. You remember all the headlines about the first female governor in Rhode Island? Okay, that is noteworthy. But it's also noteworthy that she is a Democrat in the state that hasn't elected a Democrat as governor since forever. Rhode Islanders have tried to balance the dictatorial one-party Democrat legislature with a Republican governor who gets to be their national spokesperson. You know, the person who travels around when all the governors gather. You would like to think that you are represented by somebody with appeal, cunning, brilliance, and soul. So now we have a member of the ruling Union Party who made the cut by less than a majority of the voters. Okay, now remember that we don't have a runoff election process. So Governor Raimondo is the second governor in a row governing the folks who didn't vote for them. But I will give you that she has appeal, has great cunning, is well educated, and may even have a soul. But since reporting for duty, she has not proven that she appreciates what really needs to be done in Rhode Island. How about this? Tomorrow, she should hold a staff meeting and say, each of you can keep your jobs if you give me a piece of paper in 24 hours that outlines a plan to make Rhode Island the #1 state in every statistical category that we are now at the bottom of. She would then keep replacing the staff until she gets the answer. What an idea. Seriously. There are many issues in Rhode Island that require thoughtful attention by our leaders. I would guess that none of these issues are original to Rhode Island, but we have the advantage of being able to assess solutions that our sister states have come up with. There are many ways to skin the cat, whatever that means. Let's agree to march on to new rewards. Let's make the headlines in only the most positive way. Please let all your friends know that there are a few of us who live in Rhode Island who know what is happening and want to make a difference. Tell them about us, please. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and God bless.